Okay, I'm going to do a little video of the contents of this box that has come to me. Let's start with the clippings. Daily Herald, Thursday, 2nd July, 1895. Interesting ads on the back. Chaos at the Royal Strand Theatre. Weeks have been spent attempting to breach the veil of secrecy surrounding the strange performance set to interrupt the run of Fanny, currently being shown in the Royal Strand Theatre, to mixed reviews. This correspondent has been frustrated in every attempt. No advance tickets were being sold, nor was there any information given by the theatre. In fact, after several interviews with managers of the theatre, it's the opinion of this correspondent that the theatre itself is unaware of the details of the production, referring only to an obscure contract reserving the theatre for a single night for the production of a new play called The King in Yellow. Yesterday evening, this correspondent attempted to attend the performance. Given the lack of advance tickets, it was assumed that a long queue would have formed. This was not the case. Several cabs, as well as personal carriages of obvious affluence, were observed pulling up to the theatre, and their fashionably dressed occupants, all wearing masks, entered the theatre without showing any tickets at all. When this correspondent reached the doors, his entry was barred by a large doorman of Indian descent, who made it clear that the performance was for invited guests only. The performance went on for a mere hour and a half. Hoping for an interview or two with the attendees after the play, this correspondent waited outside for the play to finish. What occurred next was as unexpected as it was horrifying. Patrons ran from the building, laughing and crying, yelling what seemed to be obscenities, though they were not in any recognizable language. What was worse was the state of their garments. Hems, which on entrance had been the height of elegance and fine tailoring, were torn to tatters. Gowns ripped to threads, tailcoats in shreds. They came from the theatre in small groups, and despite every effort to engage them in conversation, they ignored all except each other. Looks of madness were seen in their eyes as they clambered into waiting conveyances of various kinds or simply ran off into the night. This inexplicable behavior has left all who witnessed it baffled. Upon return to the theatre the following day, all reference to the play had disappeared, and none would make mention of it or comment on the events of the previous evening. When Scotland Yard was informed of the events in question, they did promise to investigate, but no evidence of such has been forthcoming. This correspondent has no explanation for what he witnessed, but will continue to seek out answers for this publication. By J. Prevert, correspondent. And the story continues in an article from the next day. This correspondent, not satisfied with the lack of information obtainable from the owners of the Royal Strand Theatre and concerned at the lack of proper investigation by Scotland Yard, chose to venture into the theatre itself in search of answers. The deserted streets of Westminster were still wet from the rain earlier in the evening, and the flickering lamplight made the theatre seem otherworldly. Approached with caution, the ingress was found a simple task. The stage entrance door had been improperly barred, inviting anyone to slip inside. A candle stub was lit, and this correspondent was able to observe the surrounding dark hallway. Passing quietly down the hall, this correspondent looked into doorways as they passed. The flickering candle gave the masks and costumes found within these rooms a strange kind of life. As hollow eyes peered back, their contents sunken into deep shadow. Ancient swords glinted with a reddish hue, and strange powders floated in the air, their chalky scent wafting into the hallway. I found a stairwell that led deeper beneath the theatre. The atmosphere grew colder as I descended, and a scent of damp earth filled the air, sending chills along my skin despite my long sleeves and waistcoat. I lit a second candle with some regret, knowing it to be my last. I had not anticipated this adventure lasting quite this long. The first landing I came to led to nothing more than a large room filled with ancient stage furniture and grand painted backdrops, with mold beginning its slow, inexorable invasion into the corners. I went down further and began to hear a noise rising from below. At first the echoes and distortion of the stairwell made it impossible to identify, but as I reached the bottom of the stair it became clear that the sound was the ululating laughter of a madman, clearly radiating through the large iron door that stood before me. I tried my best to open the door without making a sound. The ensuing shriek of rusted hinges caused me to freeze in my tracks, but no change came to the high-pitched laughter that continued from the slowly opening doorway. Once I pulled back the door to its fullest extent, I had to grip the rusty handle to keep myself from fainting dead away at the sight which greeted me. The laughter had abruptly died to distant echoes, and then to silence. The room was brightly lit with candles, their bases melted into large beehive-shaped mounds scattered haphazardly across the floor. The walls were covered in their entirety by the scrawling of a child. Phrases such as "the tattered robes of the stranger," "the yellow king," and "distant Carcosa" were repeated over and over in all angles and sizes. Yellow suns, drawn always in pairs, attended the mad scrawls. Most of all, a strange hieroglyphic could be seen in every corner of the room. Every space that had no writing contained the sigil. I drew it in my notebook from memory once I quitted that awful place. Stranger still was the floor of the chamber. Apart from a small circle in the center of the room, and a narrow walkway to the entrance in which I stood, the floor was filled completely. The same small statue, about a foot tall, of a man dressed in tattered robes, a crown upon his head, his face covered by a shroud or hood, had been carved and placed on the floor. It had been carved again and again, always the same. Hundreds of the statues stood. Every square inch of floor not taken by candles contained one of these strange figures. I felt their gaze upon me as I stood dumbfounded in the doorway. I felt unnerved to the core. It took me several moments to master myself before, steeling my resolve, I entered the room. I trod amongst the statues and reached the center of the room. There on the floor, in a narrow circle, just large enough for a man to sit, was a note. Scrawled in the same hand as that which marked the walls, it read, "My work is done, and my yellow lord has freed me from my travails. I am free now to seek out oblivion. I shall travel overseas to the government lethal chamber to seek peace from the voices that haunt me." I exited the building with all haste, for fear that whatever madness haunted that hall should attend me as well. I gave my report to the Yard as well as my newspaper. I do not know what has happened since. I shall take a leave of absence and go abroad. I have been so shaken by what I saw that I need to escape. I heard some philanthropist connected with the museum had acquired the statuary. For what purpose, I cannot say. This will be my final column with this publication. I have seen things. Joshua Prevort, correspondent. One last piece of paper. 19 October 1899. My dear Joshua Prevort, my contacts at your inestimable newspaper inform me of your articles, which thankfully were never allowed to be published. It is of the first importance that our activities remain obscured from the public eye. From what I understand, you are no longer in any state to reveal any secrets you may have stumbled across, and the Sussex Lunatic Asylum does not allow its inmates any outgoing correspondence. I cannot accept even that remote risk, however. I am writing you to inform you that I have acquired the artifacts and documents you claim to have discovered under the Strand. I have been instructed by the servants that your articles, even if unpublished, pose a threat to our order. I will concoct insolvency so that I may fall from the public spotlight, the better to keep these artifacts safe until they are needed. I tell you this so you understand the futility of any further attempts to discuss or expound upon this matter. When the time for the statues is right, the world must never suspect. We will ensure that you live out the rest of your days in your cell, Mr. Prevort. The servants will ensure that you come to no harm. Your madness belies your report, and that is of paramount importance. Know that the secrets you uncovered merely scratch the surface of our plans. Fare thee well, Mr. Prevort. F. Tennyson Neely. F. Tennyson Neely, publisher. And the final thing that was in this box that I had to pry open with a hammer because it was nailed shut. The final thing I found in the box. Happy seen the yellow side.